Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Friday, the Friday recap here on RaceWeek. And today we are going to discuss the first day of track action at the British Grand Prix weekend. And first off, we need to start out, obviously, the big news which came out after we were on air yesterday, that Sergio Perez did in fact test positive for COVID-19 and he is unable to take part in this weekend's British Grand Prix, and most likely won't be able to take part in next weekend's race either. Now, obviously, we all wish Sergio Perez well. I mean, it's obviously we hope that he has a speedy recovery. We are thankful that as we know right now that it's not serious what he's got. It's not a serious form of the disease, but it must suck to be so hyped to take part in the Grand Prix, especially on a track which the Racing Point is looking good round, as proven today. A race which he most probably thought he could do something with, and especially when you're potentially fighting for your career as well. To have this really must suck. And I've been saying how odd it is, because usually I am at the British Grand Prix, and I've been saying how odd it is to be building up to a British Grand Prix and not travelling to the circuit, and how weird that feels. I keep thinking to myself, why am I not there, even though I'm fully aware of the reason why. If that's what it's like for just someone on the other side of the fence, imagine what it must be like for Sergio Perez to be feeling all fit and well, he's not having any symptoms whatsoever, it's been said, to be feeling fit and well, all ready to get in the car and deliver and do the job, and yet he can't race, he has to sit back and watch. Imagine how that must feel. It's really not ideal, especially, as I said, especially for someone that is potentially fighting for his career. But that's unfortunately the time that we live in right now. He had reason to travel back to Mexico. He had a family emergency, and obviously we all wish his family well as well. He had a reason to do that, to go back to Mexico. And obviously it shows that despite all the precautions you can take, at least there is some way that the virus could sneak through any kind of defences. Now, it can be said, F1 has done very well. Until now, compared to, for example, the Premier League, which had like 2 or 3 tests every round, F1 has done very well. The only positive tests before then were of people that aren't regularly in the paddock. In fact, I remember hearing that the people that tested positive in Hungary were marshals. But it's just unbelievable that you have no positive tests at all, and then of all people, it's a driver that's the first to get it. And it's something, not just a driver where it could really impact his career. Because, of course, this is the crucial time for Perez to be proving to Racing Point to keep him for next year. But let's go on to today's action. It was announced literally just before practice 1, but obviously it was decided before, that Nico Hülkenberg will be replacing Perez for this weekend, and most likely next weekend. Now, one person's loss is another's gain, and this could be a real opportunity, because Nico Hülkenberg is probably going to be driving the fastest car that he's ever driven in his career this weekend and next weekend, and he has a chance, even if these are his last 2 races in Formula 1, he does actually have a legit chance of getting that monkey off his back, in the sense that he hasn't scored a podium yet. He has a chance to get that monkey off his back, and if it does turn out to be his last 2 races in Formula 1, I'm pretty sure that will be a good way for him to end his career. Now let's talk about today's action. And there was a lot of it. The weekend got underway with practice one. You saw Nico Hülkenberg getting bolted up. He's wearing a completely black crash helmet. Obviously, he didn't have time to get a new one. But there were already struggles. You had Kimi Raikkonen spin it. Now, his spin was very easy. Looked a bit pathetic, but it's very easy to do. If you do sim racing, going into Luffield, it's very easy for the rear to spin. Grip is not very high. It's at the point where the speed point where every application to the throttle is high torque round there. At that point in the gear range, however you call it. And it's very easy to get a little impatient on the throttle and to lose it. Very easy to do, so it wasn't really a pathetic mistake. And then you saw Antonio Giovinazzi lose it and shed debris all over the track, which put out the red flag. As you can see, that's what you've got on screen right now. But it seems like he went into Beckett's corner. The rear, just an aerodynamic anomaly with the way that he went. Because we have seen with these cars, any kind of anomaly, aerodynamic instability caused by driver inputs, it's very hard to save the car. Especially with these long wheelbases that you have of today's cars. But that's what happened, and then that flat spotted his tyres, and then it flat spotted them enough so that when Antonio Giovinazzi went and tried to go back to the pits, he drove too quickly and shed bits of car all over the track, which brought out the red flag. So this is the result of practice one. Red Bull showed good pace in practice one, not that representative though, with it being practice one, but the car looked to be a lot more stable for the most part than it has been so far this year. Lewis Hamilton was second. The Racing Point, as I said earlier, looked really good. Then you had Alex Albon. Charles Leclerc was in 5th. Head of Valtteri Bottas in 6th. Esteban Ocon in 7th. Daniel Ricciardo in 8th. Nico Hülkenberg did a reasonable job in his first session in the car to get himself up to 9th. I believe around 6/10 off of Lance Stroll. And then Danny Kvyat finished the session in 10th. You may be wondering why Sebastian Vettel is at bottom of the timesheets. He did not go out because of an intercooler issue. It seems like apparently it was a very small issue, but it had big consequences in the sense that he could not go out. And he did not have a good day in the slightest, did Vettel. But now let's talk about practice 2. In the afternoon, more representative conditions, although it's expected to get 10 degrees cooler tomorrow, so it's not as representative as it could be, but it was very hot. The big story of the session was Alex Albon. He went into Stowe Corner, lost the rear, and then overcorrected, which sent him on a one-way trajectory into the barrier. Now, what happened, as I just mentioned, he just overcorrected a slide, which obviously sent him into the barrier. That's obviously going to knock his confidence. It was actually quite a big impact. He had to go to the medical centre. And it's not going to go down well with Helmut Marko. It's quite a big repair job. I'm assuming it wasn't a race gearbox in the car, which is quite lucky because I think the impact could well have damaged the gearbox. And there's actually a possibility it could have damaged the chassis as well, because a side impact, there's always a risk that the suspension could dig in and damage the chassis. But Alex Albon obviously had an impact. He also had Nicholas Latifi having an issue at the end of the session. But if you look at the result, Lance Stroll showed really good pace in the Racing Point once again, and he ended the session fastest, ahead of Alexander Albon in second. Despite his crash, he did set quite a reasonable qualifying sim to end the session in second. We haven't seen the best of the Mercedes yet, I'm pretty sure. Obviously. They haven't turned the wick up yet. In between the two Mercedes was Charles Leclerc, who, despite a spin and a very difficult to drive Ferrari, had a reasonable day in a track that does tend to suit him. Then you had Carlos Sainz, Nico Hulkenberg, Pierre Gasly, Daniel Ricciardo and Kimi Raikkonen having a good day, rounding out the top 10. You may be wondering why Max Verstappen is down. For those who didn't watch practice, you may be wondering why Max Verstappen is down in 14th. His qualifying lap got blocked by Romain Grosjean. I think Romain Grosjean might take a penalty for this. He went into Beckett's. Romain Grosjean was on the racing line going, "Sir, I don't really know what he was doing." And it was not really his finest moment was Romain Grosjean. Understandably, Max Verstappen was furious. He really gesticulated. But he probably wasn't as rattled throughout the session as Sebastian Vettel. He continued to have problems during practice too, and when he got out the car, the onboards looked horrible. And he was only 18th fastest. I mean, I'm not really sure if he actually did a quali sim, but the onboards, they just looked horrible. And when the car is at its worst, it seems Sebastian Vettel is just not enjoying it. He's just really off when the car is at its worst. And which is not really a surprise considering he's driving a car like that. It just looks like a monster on boards. It just looks like a monster to drive. And Ferrari's comments saying that they are not expecting to win races till 2022, as I said, it looks like a very bleak year and a half ahead for Ferrari. But that is it. Now let's talk about these support set for F1. Now let's talk about the support sessions, because both Formula 2 and Formula 3 had fairly interesting qualifying sessions today. Formula 3 took place. It was Théo Pourchaire who topped the practice session earlier on. But the qualifying session was quite the different story. It was very topsy-turvy. You had Théo Pourchaire lead the way at first. But then, as the track improved, you saw more drivers improve. And it was Logan Sargent, in the end, who took pole position for Prima, ahead of Liam Lawson in second. Then you have Oscar Piastri, who lines up in third, ahead of championship leader Oscar Piastri. Then you have Max Futrell in fourth, and then you have Frederic Vesti, who lines up in fifth, ahead of Sebastian Fernandez in sixth, Jake Hughes in seventh, Narim Zendelli in eighth, Alexander Smoller in ninth, with Clement Novalak rounding out the top 10. It was a very last-gasp effort from Logan Sargent. It looks like the likes of Piastri and Lawson were in control, but he did manage to take it in the end. David Beckman and Théo Pourchaire will be quite disappointed to be outside the top 10. It must be mentioned, traffic was a problem, so there are a few drivers that are out of position here. You have Bent Viscal in 13th, ahead of Richard Verschoor in 14th. Both of those two will be disappointed. Caleb Williams starts in 15th, ahead of a good showing from Sophia Flert. Ollie Coolwell in 17th. Alex Peroni suffered from having a lap time deleted. He starts in 18th. Then you have Dennis Hauger with Ben Barnico on his F3 debut. Then you had Duan, Dunner, Stanek, Fraga, Fittipaldi, Nannini, Schumacher, Das, Malvasiti and Deleda rounding out the grid. Of course, Formula 3 is going to see the first race of the weekend tomorrow, as they will be the first out on track. And it's going to be interesting to see if Logan Sargent can defend his position. Last year we did see a very interesting battle between a Prima and a High-Tech in the first race at Silverstone, between Jury Vips and Jehan Daruvala. it was actually Jury Vips, I believe, that was on pole, and he managed to fend him off. But could we see the same tomorrow? And also, how far is the likes of Beckman or Pourchaire going to get up from their, and also Peroni, from their disappointing grid positions? But I'm pretty certain that we are in for an interesting Formula 3 race at this track tomorrow, at Silverstone tomorrow. Now it's time to talk about the Formula 2. Now this was a very topsy-turvy session with a fairly mixed up grid. A lot of the big hitters struggling in this session. And pole position went to an incredible lap by Felipe Drugovich. Now he is really setting this series alight. And this does actually go to show, of course, Felipe, he is obviously one of the surprises of the weekend, of the season so far. But to go from scoring only 1 point finish in Formula 3 the previous year, and now to being a consistent frontrunner in Formula 2, as they said in commentary, some people are just better with faster, more powerful cars. So this could be the case with Drugovich, that some drivers get better as you go up the ladder. And the cars get more powerful. Maybe Felipe Drugovich could be one of them. He is certainly putting his name out there. And he took a well-deserved pole position. Elsewhere, we did have quite a few shocks in the session. You had, and obviously the most notable one is going to be, obviously, Robert Schwartzman, who just seemed to really struggle, didn't seem that dialed in. Of course, we know that he is better in the race than in qualifying, but from 18th on the grid, it's going to be very hard to repeat what he did in Hungary, in the first race in Hungary. But I mean, he did have a little bit of bad luck in the form of having laps ruined by traffic, which was a theme throughout the weekend. Or throughout the day, there were, in pretty much all Formula, you had issues. A lot of drivers had issues with traffic. But if he can't progress, that will be quite bad for his championship, with Eilert up in second. Then you have Mick Schumacher in third, Christian Lundgaard in fourth. Then you have Mazepin in fifth. Aitken looked strong at first. Then you have Deruvala in seventh, Zhu in eighth, Tsunoda in ninth. I think Carlin will be a bit disappointed with seventh and ninth, considering their pace. Then you have Delatrez rounding out the top 10. Then you have Matsushita, Tictum, Kyoto, Piquet, Armstrong will be disappointed with that. Galeo, Sato, Schwartzman, Nissany, Alesi, Markelov and Samaya. I'm not sure Nissany is going to stay in 19th place, as he had a lot of issues with blocking other drivers. I believe he blocked like 3 drivers, so I think he might expect a penalty coming his way. Robert Schwartzman was under investigation for allegedly impeding Sean Galeo, but I'm not really sure that what happened there was worthy of a penalty. I'm not really sure, because both him and Sean Galeo were not on flying laps, and it wasn't on the racing line, so really Galeo did take a bit of a risk driving in quite a small gap whilst the car in front was clearly weaving. Because I'm not really sure that that's worthy of a penalty for Schwartzman. But if he did get a penalty, that would be more bad news. But the big question is, how far up can he go? And can Drugovich defend his lead and take a second win of the season? It's going to be an interesting race tomorrow. But that is it when it comes to all of today's action. And tomorrow we have, apparently track temperature is expected to be 10 degrees cooler, which could have a bit of an effect, and also could mean that lap times increase with tyres overheating less. But We don't really have an idea of who's the favourite of the pace of the Red Bull yet going into tomorrow, and that will all come clear come the final practice session. But thank you very much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow for the Saturday recap.